The sky that afternoon was the color of a tin kettle left too long in the ashes. The wind carried no scent but dust and distant thunder. And there she sat on a wooden crate, knees drawn close, a child wrapped to her breast like a fallen note in a song no one remembered. Rain tapped soft on her shoulders, her bonnet long soaked through, the ribbon limp against her cheek. Her dress, once blue, now wore the hue of soil and heartbreak, and still she did not shift. Pulled away hours ago, not when the station master muttered something about the next arrival being 3 days late. Not when the townsfolk passed, one by one, pretending not to see. The baby made a sound, not a cry, just a whimper, like something between breath and hope. She shifted only then, lifting the edge of the shawl to shield the child's face. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from tiredness that had settled too deep to shake off. Her boots were cracked, the left sole nearly split clean through. Mud clung to the hem of her skirt, like old regret. There had been a letter once, folded neatly, words penned in strong, slanted lines. Promises of a cabin on the edge of town. A mule, a man with gentle hands and plans for spring. She had read it under candlelight back east, each line a rope she clung to when the world around her crumbled. She had sold her wedding ring for the ticket, said goodbye to her mother's grave, and boarded the train with nothing but a satchel, and the child her husband had left behind. But no one came to meet her. No one wore a dusty brown hat with kindness in his eyes. No one called her name at the platform, and after a while, even the station master stopped asking if someone would. A bell clanged down the street. Doors closed. Rain thickened. Inside the mercantile, a young boy with ginger hair and 2 large boots looked out the window. He tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Ma," he whispered, "she's still out there." The woman did not turn. She was counting coins. "She leave soon enough," she said. "But the baby, she ain't our burden, Eli." The boy pressed his hand to the glass, watching as the woman outside rocked slightly, humming low. Her voice was a thread of warmth in the cold wind, and the baby clutched her shawl with tiny fists, like he believed in her song more than the storm. By dusk, most of the town pretended she wasn't there, but one pair of eyes watched her longer than the rest. From the high window of the church, the preacher stood in shadow. He had seen souls come and go, some loud, some broken, some roaring with sin. But this one, she was like ash before flame, quiet, waiting, heavy with unshed fire. He walked the aisle to the back room and pulled out the old donation box. It had been months since it was opened. He pocketed 2 coins and returned to the front steps, coat pulled tight. The rain had turned colder, and the path to the platform shone like spilled oil in the dim light. She looked up as he approached, blinking through wet lashes. "Sister," he said, gently, "we've not much, but there's bread at the mission if you wish." Her gaze was steady, not harsh, not pleading, just worn. "I'd rather stay near the train," she answered, voice low, tired. "It won't come soon, I know." He hesitated. "There's no one waiting for you here, is there?" Looked away, back toward the iron rails that stretched into mist. "There was," she whispered, but he must have changed his mind. The preacher nodded once, heavy-hearted. There were few things crueler than silence where a promise once lived. He left her, then, not by choice, but by helplessness, and the wind followed his retreat like a dog with its tail between its legs. Night came slow and gray, curling around. Buildings like smoke from an unseen fire. She stayed where she was. The rain had slowed to mist now, but her clothes were soaked through. Her baby stirred, face pale against the edge of her collarbone. She pressed her lips to his forehead, closing her eyes. "I'm here," she whispered, not knowing if it was for him or herself. And still no one came, until the boy returned. Eli. He crept across the platform like a mouse, small fists clenching a biscuit and half an apple. He dropped them beside the crate and bolted back into the shadows. She opened her eyes, saw the food, said nothing, but her fingers brushed the biscuit like it was holy in a nearby saloon. Men laughed. Too loudly, cards were slapped on wood. A bottle broke. Someone sang off-key, and behind it all, a tall man in a black vest watched through the window. His name had been written on that letter once. Not by her, but by a friend who'd owed a favor. A match arranged by coin and desperation. And when the day came, when the train whistled in, he had stood behind the door and stayed there. He saw her silhouette even now, just a ghost in the distance. He muttered something about rain and bad timing and ordered another drink. Midnight. Neared Dodd, the child had stopped crying. The woman did not sleep. She watched the dark, listened to the earth. She did not pray, not anymore. But when a low hoofbeat echoed in the distance, steady, unhurried, she looked up, eyes wide, lips parted, and there, cutting through the mist, like something drawn from an old, half-forgotten tale, came a horse and a man. He did not rush, he did not speak. He stopped a few feet away, dismounted, and stood still. She saw his face by the lantern's weak light, not handsome, but strong, lined not with age, but with solitude. He removed something from his saddlebag, a thick, folded oilskin, walked forward and offered it without a word. She hesitated, then reached. Their hands did not touch, but something passed between them, understanding, kindness unspoken. He glanced at the child, sleeping still, then turned, gesturing with a nod. Out, past the station, toward a hill, a fence in need of repair, and a house with no smoke in the chimney. His voice, when it came, was low as thunder, too far to fear. "It's dry," he said, and then he waited. The road away from the station was more mud than path, and yet she walked it without asking where it led. The oilskin cloak hung from her shoulders like a borrowed sky, warm, unfamiliar, kind. In her arms, the child slept, his breath soft against her collarbone. Behind her, the station shrank into shadow, its emptiness left to the wind. She followed the man at a distance. He did not turn around, nor slow to wait, not out of cruelty, but because something in him trusted her to come, if she wished. He was a man shaped by solitude, not dominance. The kind who spoke only when silence had done all it could. His boots made no sound on the sodden. Trailed his horse, a gray with weary flanks and gentle eyes, walked beside him without reins, loyal, like they'd known the same grief. And ahead, through the drizzle, a house came into view, set at the edge of a forgotten field, where old fences slouched like tired elders. It stood alone, 2 stories of wood grayed by time. Windows shuttered, the porch slanted and weeping from the weight of years. No smoke in the chimney, no welcome at the door. And yet, something about it felt ... unfinished, not abandoned, just paused. He opened the gate and let her pass first. She stepped through with caution, her skirts heavy with water, the hem now torn in places. Inside, the house smelled of dust and cedar. No fire yet, only the ghost of one long gone. The floor creaked under her as she stepped inside, and she turned, unsure whether to speak, unsure whether it was truly hers to enter. He was already in the hearth room, kneeling by the fireplace, flint and steel in his hand. No words, just the strike of spark, and then light. She sat on the edge of the wooden floor, baby in her lap, as flames rose, slow at first, then growing, licking at the dry logs like they, too, had waited for someone to come home. The warmth was startling. She hadn't felt it in days. The man stood again, then stepped away into the back of the house. A moment later, he returned with a folded wool blanket and a faded cot, its fabric frayed but clean. He placed them near the fire, then knelt, tying twine around one broken leg to hold it steady, still. No words, only action, only kindness. She laid her child down gently, hands moving with practiced tenderness, and pulled the blanket over him. He sighed in his sleep, a sound like trust. The man stood by the door, as if deciding something, then reached for a rusted hook by the frame and lifted his hat from his head. Only then did their eyes meet and linger, hers full of unasked questions, his full of answers he didn't know how to say. He nodded, not goodbye, not welcome, just I'll be near. Then he left her there, in the room with the fire. She sat long into the night, watched the flames flicker across the beams, listened to the roof drip its final tears, and wondered who this man was who offered shelter without name or condition. He had no ring on his hand, no photo on the mantel, no signs of a woman's touch in the kitchen. Just dust, silence, and a strange sort of waiting. She walked softly through the house, as if not to wake something sacred, found a basin in the kitchen, a cloth by the window, washed her hands, then her child's face, found a corner to rest, but her eyes would not close. She watched the door until sleep took her. Still sitting upright, fingers curled around the wooden cradle of her baby's leg at dawn. The storm had passed. Light filtered through the slats like gold, sifted through prayer. She woke to the smell of coffee and the scrape of a shovel through the window. She saw him outside, fixing the shutter that had come loose. He moved with quiet purpose, no show of effort, just doing what needed to be done. She opened the door, child now swaddled close to her chest, and stepped onto the porch. He looked up, not startled, just aware. "Mornin'," he said, first word since the night before. She nodded, double quotes, "Thank you," she whispered, voice raspy. He tipped his head slightly. "There's bread inside." "Not much. You'll want it warm." She turned back toward the house, unsure what more to say. But before she stepped inside, we spoke again. "You're welcome to stay, long as you like." It was not a declaration, not charity, not pity, just a space being offered, like a chair pulled back from a table, like a porch light left burning inside the kitchen. She found a loaf, a chipped plate, and a knife dulled with time. She cut slowly, made 2 slices, and fed the child first. He cooed against her shoulder, his eyes brighter. Already she touched his cheek and let herself breathe for the first. Time in what felt like weeks. The house had no laughter, no history she could feel, but it had warmth, and in this land that was almost more than gold. Over the next days, they fell into a rhythm not spoken aloud. He rose early, tended to a pair of cattle behind the barn, chopped wood, repaired hinges, always moving, always watching, not her, but the world. Like a man learning how to live again by simply keeping busy. She swept the floors, boiled water, laid her child down, unfolded quilts near the fire while she mended seams and patched socks left behind. Once, she asked him where the others were, family, neighbors, someone. He just shrugged. Most are gone. Dust took the rest. And she understood, because dust had taken her too. One afternoon, as she hung a wet blanket outside, an older man rode past the edge of the fence line. He paused, tipped his hat. "Well, I'll be," the man muttered to himself. Someone finally brought light back to that place. He rode on. She didn't ask what he meant. But that night, when she lit the lantern in the window, she imagined he was right. The man, the one who had offered her this roof, never asked for her name, never asked where the baby's father was, never asked anything at all. And somehow, that was the greatest mercy. She gave pieces of herself slowly, in the way she made biscuits with honey, instead of salt, in how she sang lullabies low, even when she thought no one was listening, in how she stitched his coat without a word when she found it torn. And he gave pieces to Dot, in how he placed a second plate out at every meal, in how he left fresh kindling near the hearth before she woke, in how he fed her child one spoonful of mashed squash without flinching, and smiled when the baby sneezed back at him. They were not building something grand. They were mending something quiet. And in this quiet, something tender began to root. Not romance. Not yet, just the soft realization that shelter could mean more than four walls. That sometimes the most broken homes were the ones waiting for the right kind of soul to return. On the sixth night, as the moon hung low and wide, he sat on the porch, a mug of coffee in hand. She stepped out, baby asleep, arms folded beneath the wool shawl. She looked at him, this quiet man who had handed her a life without claiming her body. Her story or her past. "Why do you help me?" she asked. He took a sip, thought long, then said, almost too softly for her to hear, "'Cause someone should have." Spring came slow to that part of the country, the kind of slow that made you wonder if winter would ever loosen its grip. But the frost broke one morning, not with thunder or fanfare, just with the hush of sunlight spilling over the fence, rails, and a robin singing like it remembered something sweet. She rose before dawn, as always, washed in the basin, dressed the baby, lit the fire. He had already gone out to the barn, his silhouette passing by the window like a memory that kept returning. No one said good morning. They didn't need to anymore. The quiet between them had become something living, not hollow, not cold, but comforting. Like the space beneath a quilt shared in silence. Like breathing next to someone who doesn't need to ask why you're crying to let you cry. That morning, she found the garden bed behind the house. It was nothing but a patch of tired dirt, boxed in by splintered boards and dry weeds. But when she knelt there, hands deep in the soil, her child babbling nearby in a basket cushioned with flannel, something inside her stirred. She didn't ask permission. She simply began, pulled weeds, dug deep, loosened the land like loosening her own ribs after too long held tight by mid-morning. Her palms were caked brown and red. She had found a rusted trowel behind the barn, and it fit in her hand like it had waited years for her. The baby clapped once when she uncovered an earthworm. She laughed, the first time in weeks. He watched her from the field, leaned against the fence post, arms crossed, one boot balanced over the other. Didn't interrupt, just took in the sight of her, sleeves rolled, braid loose, sunlight catching the tiny curve of her smile. She didn't see him, but when he passed her later that day and left a small paper bag on the porch bench inside, half a pouch of old seeds she knew he had. There was no declaration between them, no talk of building a life or sharing a future, only acts, small, unassuming. He mended the front step. She scrubbed the old curtains. He carved new pegs for her coat. She patched the knees in his work pants without being asked. One night, when the wind howled too close, she found the child's cradle beside the fire, newly built from pine, the wood still fresh with scent. She touched it like a relic. He said nothing, but when their eyes met across the room, she whispered, "Not thank you, but you made it safe." And he understood. The garden began to bloom. Peas, carrots, a stubborn row of beans. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. The soil, like her, responded to care. She hummed when she worked now. Not songs of sorrow, but ones with soft rising ends. The kind you didn't sing unless you believed tomorrow might actually come. One afternoon, the boy from town, Eli, returned. This time, he didn't drop bread and run. He stood at the fence, holding a paper cone of marigold seeds. Mama says, "Flowers keep bad spirits out." She smiled and took them. "Then we'll plant them by the porch." The boy grinned. He ain't so scary, you know. Who? He nodded toward the barn. The one who don't talk much. My PA says he used to laugh before his brother died. She turned slowly, looked toward the figure in the shadows. Quiet, working, always working. What happened? She asked, gently. The boy shrugged. Ranch fire. His brother didn't make it. Then he tipped his hat like a man grown and ran back toward town. That evening, after the baby slept, she found him on the back porch. The sky was streaked in fire, dusk. Watched the horizon for a while. Then, quietly, he said, he was younger than me, braver, too. She listened. He ran back in for a calf we couldn't save anyway. I told him not to, but I wasn't fast enough. Silence stretched between them. I built this house for him, really. For his family. Figured I'd sleep in the loft. Instead, it just, She looked down at her hands. Soil still beneath. Her nails. I came out here hoping someone would choose me, she said, voice soft. Not because I was useful or quiet. Just me. He turned his head. You weren't chosen by mistake, he said. And for a moment, just a moment, they sat in stillness that felt like healing. The days grew longer. She baked bread again, braided her hair in the mornings. The child started standing, wobbling between their outstretched hands, and slowly, the house began to feel lived in, not claimed, not possessed, but shared. One golden afternoon, she asked him if she could repaint the door. He handed her the tin of leftover paint from the shed, without a word, and when she dipped her brush and began, he sat nearby, fixing the stair rail, not because it needed it, but because he wanted to be near. She painted it yellow. He smiled and said, bright suits you. But not all things stay quiet forever. On a still evening, just before the moon rose, she was rocking her child in the front room when something outside caught her eye. Movement. A man standing at the edge of the property, half hidden by a dying elm. Her breath caught. She stood. The baby cradled tight. He didn't step forward, didn't wave, just watched, like a man who recognized something that once belonged to him, and didn't like the way it had grown without him. She moved to the porch, slowly, quietly. The rancher joined her without needing to be called. His eyes followed hers. He saw the figure, stood still a moment, then said, "You know him." Her voice was a whisper. "I think he's the one who left us at the station." The rancher's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. He looked at her. "Do you want him here?" She shook her head. "No." He nodded, then said, steady as ever, "Then he won't be. The figure vanished into the dusk, but the air shifted, and she knew the past hadn't come to reclaim her. It had come to test her, and this time, she wasn't alone. By morning, the man was gone, but the wind had changed, and so had she. The porch felt different beneath her boots, firmer somehow. Her child was heavier in her arms. Not because he'd grown, but because she'd finally stopped bracing for the world to steal him. She looked down the path that led to town and knew she'd no longer flinch at every shadow. Still, she kept the lantern lit by the window that night, just in case. It was 2 days later when he returned. Not from the trees this time, but riding bold down the path as if he still owned the earth beneath him. His boots hit the porch like thunder. She was in the doorway before he could knock, her child on her hip, her back straight. He looked the same. Dusty coat, crooked jaw, the smell of cheap tobacco clinging to him like flies to fruit left too long in the sun. He didn't smile, just looked her undown, eyes landing on the baby's face like a claim, waiting to be made. "Well, ain't this sweet?" he muttered. She didn't answer. He leaned one hand against the frame. "You were supposed to be mine." Her voice was calm. "And you left us on a platform in the rain." He chuckled. "Things change. I got work now. A little land up past the creek. I heard you was still hanging around. Figured I'd give you another chance. I'm feeling generous." She stepped forward just enough to close the door behind her. "No." That single word echoed louder than a rifle shot. His smile faltered. "You got no claim out here. No ring, no name. That baby's mine if I say he is. He's not," she said softly, and then came the voice from behind her, steady, deep, not raised, but absolute. "She stays." The rancher stepped into view from the side of the house, sleeves rolled, sweat at his collar from a morning's work. No gun, just presence, enough to fill the space. Between them, like a wall of stone, the man on the porch sneered. "So this your new plan, huh? Find the quiet fool with land and settle in." The rancher didn't blink. "She stays," he said again, "because she chooses to. You didn't claim her then. You don't get to now." The wind held its breath. The baby stirred, but didn't cry. The man on the porch shifted. "I could bring the law." "You'd be bringing it to a town that saw you walk away from her," the rancher replied. "A town that remembers." And as if summoned, down the path came Eli and his mother, baskets in hand. The old preacher just behind them. The ranch hand on his mule. No weapons, just witnesses. The man swore under his breath, eyes darting jaw clenched. Fine, he spat. Keep your charity case. She'll be begging bread in a month. He stepped down from the porch, but just before he turned to go, the woman spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried like the prairie wind. I would have followed you anywhere. You didn't have to love me, just not lie, but you left. And in doing so, you taught me who I really am. She paused, then looked down at her son, and who he will never have to be. The man rode off, a cloud of dust rising behind him like a final curse. No one watched, no one waved, and the silence he left was not tense, but relieved, final, inside the house. The cradle rocked gently. Sunlight pooled on the floor. She placed the child inside, then turned to the man who had stood like a pillar at her side. He didn't say a word, just watched. Her dot waiting, she walked to him slowly, stopped only when they stood breath to breath. Do you still want us here? She asked. His answer was a whisper, almost lost in the creak of the wind outside. I didn't want a family after mine was gone. He looked down, voice rough. But now I can't imagine this place without yours. She reached for his hand. He took it, calloused and strong, but warm, steady. Her fingers curled into his like a key finding its lock. And for the first time since the train station, she closed her eyes, not to shut out the world, but to feel it. All dot, every breath, every beat, every moment of safety earned not by luck, but by choosing it again and again. Together, the next morning, they planted the marigolds. Eli brought more seeds, grinning as he handed her a trowel. The porch steps were sanded smooth. The cradle had new carvings, tiny horses, stars, wheat. The preacher stopped by, tipping his hat, and said only, "You've made this place holy." The townsfolk, once silent, now nodded when they passed. The storekeeper's wife sent honey cakes. Even the innkeeper left a shawl at the fence with no note, just a pin that sparkled like apology. She wore it that night, standing by the garden. Baby asleep upstairs. He joined her, lantern light dancing between them. Funny thing, he said, watching the fireflies rise. I used to think a house was just wood and windows. He nodded, half smiling himself. No, it's whoever you open the door for. They stood there for a long time, not needing to say what they both already knew. The storm was over, and the sun, though late, had come home. If you've ever been left out in the rain, clutching your heart like a child no one wanted, let this be your reminder. You are not a burden. You are not what someone walked away from. You are what someone brave and quiet will one day stay for, not to save you, but to make room beside their fire. Because some houses don't become homes, someone like you walks through the door.